I don't watch anime, so when everyone started losing their minds over solo leveling, I had one question. Is this actually worth it, or is it just hype? And this show wastes no time. The first episode drops you straight into a world where hunters are ranked S through E, each serving a different role on the battlefield with different roles like tanks or healers and even mages. And the main threat holding all of this together is dungeon gates, and they're basically a tear in space to another dimension filled with monsters that are actually immune to our normal weapons, and the hunters are the only ones who can kill them. And if the gate isn't closed within a week, it becomes a dungeon break where anything on the other side can cross over to our world freely. So this is where our main guy comes in, Jinwoo. Known as the weakest hunter alive, he awakened to an E rank, so he's always seen himself as a liability, and he only keeps going on raids not because he wants to, but because if he stops, his family doesn't survive. So we pick up with Jinwoo in a raid where he literally is just running for his life because he isn't strong enough to kill anything. And right when they think this dungeon is cleared, they realize it's a double dungeon, and nobody on this crew has ever seen one before, so they take a vote on whether to continue.
That's 6 in favor of going and 6 opposed, which would make Jinwoo here the deciding vote.
And like every horror movie ever, they ignore every single red flag and walk straight into hell. And this double dungeon has some uncanny looking statues inside, and if this was me, I'm turning around instantly. But of course, the door shuts right behind them, and one person even tries to leave and he gets smoked instantly, and now everyone realizes they're in a sealed tomb, and that is exactly what it becomes. And this double dungeon turns the show into a straight up horror movie. And Jinwoo might have been the weakest hunter, but he caught on to some of the things the quickest, and they need to follow the commandments like worship and praise.
See? Look, just like that old kids game. So, all eyes on the statues.
But the final test is the least obvious one. The door opens and the statues start closing in. But as long as they all stay still and don't leave and hold their ground, everyone will get out safely eventually. But people start to freak out and take off and leave at the chance they get, until Jinwoo, who has lost his leg, just tells them to go. He'll stay back and keep the door open long enough for them to leave, essentially sacrificing himself. And just when it looks like he dies alone, a menu or a screen pops up in front of him like a video game saying, "You have earned the ability to become a player. Do you accept?" Like, this was insane. Your first thought is there's no way they just killed the main character, and what the hell was that menu? But Jinwoo wakes up in the hospital after this and learns that 2 of his closest friends from the dungeon are pretty much done. One of them lost an arm and one is severely traumatized. So everyone's wondering, how did the weakest hunter survive if so many others died and were injured? So the Hunters Association speculates he had a second awakening.
If they really encountered insta-kill level magic beasts, there's no way an average hunter would have made it out of that situation alive.
And a second awakening is very rare, but the screen is already telling him to complete some daily strength training. And when he ignores it on the first day, he ends up in a wasteland running from giant centipedes with no weapons. And one tip, don't die. And turns out that was just a penalty for not listening. So once he completes the punishment quest, this is when we find out he can actually level up, which is something no other hunter can do and has never been able to do. Like, he can earn skill points and upgrade specific stats like strength and speed. He can do all of it. And by episode 4, we're not waiting on lore anymore. We're experiencing the show with Jinwoo as he experiences everything. And once he realizes what the system can actually do, there's no going back. So Jinwoo fully accepts the system, and he even says, "What have I gotta lose? I've already died once." And he goes all in. Whatever the screen asks him to do, he does it. And the proof shows up immediately. And as he kills more, he levels up quick, and the magical beasts get weaker. And you can actually see it in the name tags going from white to orange to red. And right as he gets comfortable, he meets the dungeon boss, a giant snake, and another test, basically asking him, "Let's see what you've got." And this is where you start to see him getting smarter too. He's not just fighting for the sake of fighting, he's actually starting to think while fighting and increasing his battle IQ. So once he completes the dungeon and finds out there's a dungeon break nearby, and he actually goes over and he wants to test his strength, right, since he's leveled up so much. So as a previous E rank, he throws a half broken sword at a D rank boss.
Can I pierce it with one strike? Let's see.
and one-taps it. And honestly, this surprised not just him, but us too. Like, he couldn't even stand up to a goblin a few episodes ago, and now he's one-tapping D-rank bosses? Like, this is insane. But after this happens and he goes back to the hospital, there's this funny scene where the doctors are literally head over heels for him after seeing his body transformation, and it is just hilarious. Like, his sister even calls him out saying,
You also look a lot taller, which is weird. Abs I can understand, but height?
and this is a good nod to fans as well, because they're actually hinting at his character's design change within the show itself, and I just really like that it just didn't go unnoticed. And next, we see Jinwoo getting recruited to help an independent squad raid a C-rank dungeon because they need members. And this is where we meet Jinho, a D-rank trust fund hunter with millions of dollars worth of gear, whose dad runs one of the last big construction or hunter guilds. I forgot, I'm not gonna lie. And Jinwoo goes into this raid assuming he's just carrying bags, but something feels off about it. But he can't quite put his finger on what it is until he and Jinwoo get betrayed and left for dead in the boss's room with a giant spider.
Go ahead and seal off the entrance to the lair, Jinwoo.
Which forces Jinwoo to show Jinwoo he's not exactly just an E rank anymore, because he beats the spider boss fairly easy, figuring out that his poison debuff on his dagger was actually the key, again showing his ability to adapt on the fly. And I forgot to mention it, but the leader of this group's name is Hwang, and his plan the whole time was to betray them and use the low ranks as bait to lure out the boss to make it look like it killed them, and then he'd get to split the money with his crew and move on. But that was before they figured out what Jinwoo actually was, because once they return to the boss arena and see that they're not dead, one of them takes a cheap shot at Jinwoo thinking he's just an E rank. And this is the moment he and the system become one, and he fully accepts it. Like, he lets it overwrite his hesitation to not kill other people, and he's no longer holding back. And the scene where he handles Hwang's group is insanely powerful, and I think it's my favorite part of this entire season, honestly, because this dude looks at them and says,
I think I get it now. If the system is bent on using me, I'm just gonna have to use the system.
and that line just hit different, because it shows the system isn't just making him stronger physically, it's changing who he is. And that's where it starts to get more complicated, because that guy Hwang, it turns out his older brother is an S rank hunter, and now he's asking questions, because what are the odds that an E rank and a D rank survive a dungeon that his brother Dong-suk died in? And him figuring this out doesn't mean anything but trouble for Jinwoo and Jinho. And after everything that's happened in these next couple episodes, Jinwoo isn't just a hunter who's leveling up anymore. He's someone the wrong people are starting to notice, and 95% of you guys aren't subscribed already. So if you're enjoying this video so far, consider dropping a sub. And Jinwoo, having no knowledge of this, just goes about his day and he goes to visit his mom, who from the start was the only reason he was ever going into the gates in the first place. And after seeing her still sick, his mind is made up. He will do whatever it takes. So when he hears about the elixir of life and gets the key to a new dungeon, he goes in with zero hesitation. And this dungeon is actually S rank and nothing like anything he's ever seen before. It's a tower with 100 levels, and each floor gets stronger, like an entire dungeon stacked on top of another entire dungeon, all the way from 1 to 100. And the first boss he meets, none of his debuffs work. His blade can't penetrate its armor, and it's actually fast enough to catch him off guard, and everything is going wrong even with his full regeneration, until he realizes he can actually use the system to buy health potions.
That's right. I have a store.
It's in my price range.
And he gets enough to stand against it one more time, and eventually he realizes there's actually one debuff he can use to make it vulnerable, and this guy almost dies like 10 times before it's done, but eventually he does win. And like I mentioned earlier, every fight he has, he learns something new. So he leaves and links back up with Jinho, and they start to build their own squad, hiring low ranks to meet their raid quota. And watching this crew clear gates like it's nothing was actually a really cool part of this show, and actually a full circle moment for whenever they were joining groups earlier in the show to clear dungeons. But speaking of this, episode 10 really impressed. Like, you've seen the fighting in action, you've seen the dungeon raids, but episode 10 gives us the most human side of Jinwoo we've seen this far.
I gotta say though, What happened to the gentle Jinwoo I used to know? It's only been a few short months, but you're like a new man.
And it's a really, really good change of pace. But then we get straight back into it with the job change quest. And this dungeon is different from anything we've seen. Like, the beasts in here have human skills like mage abilities, knight abilities, and even assassin abilities. And in here we meet IGRIS, the Blood Red, and this guy is badass.
Knight Commander IGRIS the Blood Red.
And he is easily the hardest challenge Jinwoo has faced. And IGRIS is beating Jinwoo's ass all up and down this dungeon. And Jinwoo even admits after the fight is done that he even barely won by a fluke, like he got luck. And once he barely survives that, he realizes it's a double dungeon quest. And this one feels like a final exam for everything he's learned up to this point. Like, the system is asking, are you actually worthy of this power you've been given? And the system actually offers him multiple classes, but the one that fits him best is Necromancer, which gives him the ability to raise a shadow army. He raises the night troops, the mages, and everything else that he's fought in this dungeon, and this works immediately. But then he goes to raise IGRIS, and the first arise fails. And here's the catch: you only have 3 attempts, and if you fail, you no longer can raise that person into your shadow army. But luckily enough for Jinwoo, he locks in, and on the 3rd he actually arises IGRIS to be his general. And Jinwoo, he's no longer just a hunter. He is something more. And we don't really know what that is. But by the end, I wasn't asking if Solo Leveling was a good anime. I was asking what I was watching next. And I'll say this. I went into Solo Leveling thinking it was going to be one of those animes where you need 30 episodes of build up before anything happens. And it gave me the exact opposite. Every episode moved the story. Every upgrade felt earned. And Jinwoo is genuinely one of the most badass main characters I've watched in a long time, because you actually feel the difference between who he was in episode 1 and who he is by the end of the show. And if you haven't seen Solo Leveling, or if you were on the fence about anime, trust me, this is the one to start with. Or if you're already a fan of anime, I'm sure you've seen it, but in the slight chance you haven't, what are you doing? Like, watch it. And I have a question for you guys. If you want me to cover season 2, let me know down in the comments. And as always, stay curious and keep the conversation going.